So today's broadcast is sponsored by Mechi still, his mother, in honor of his daughter's chasana. I just want to quickly find his mother's name. Unless Mechi's on, you could remind us. If not, I'll look it up. I don't remember. I think it was on the Agudah Loop email. I cannot find it now.
There he is. He just came on.
Oh, so Mechi will remind us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mechi. I'm in the middle of announcing that the broadcast is sponsored by her mother, but I forgot her name.
Blima Bas Reb Chaim.
Blima Bas Reb Chaim, who's a Shom Shrav and Aliyah, in honor of the festivities of the Chasana and the Sheva Brachas. I can see it in your eyes. Baruch Hashem. Nachas.
Shkaya.
Okay, so let's get started. I believe we're right at the top of Amar Aleph. So did the Olim have something to drink before 4:30? I didn't.
I did.
Oh, good for you.
I set my alarm and I was gonna get up. I figured I'll do a Nate's already if I'm up, but no, it didn't happen. Straight back. And that second sleep was better than the first, but
at night you think that you want to eat, so you set your alarm. But Shas Maisa, in the morning you think, you know what? I can forgo a coffee. I'd rather have the extra 15 minutes.
yeah.
On days like we've had, it could be dangerous not to have enough fluid in you.
That's right.
Yeah, so
that's right. It's brutal. Okay, so let's see the Hilig Gemara. Omar Bar Hamduri, Omar Shmuel, Kremia Shal Machzelas. So you had a mat that's made out of woven reeds, and there's extra pieces that stick out along the edges that you trimmed off. So you have some extra pieces of reeds that are really just remnants of a mat. And what's normally done with these mats is they have two functions, Rashi says. One is you would keep it on the floor. In those days, they didn't have hard surface floors. They had earth, and they didn't want the dust to get kicked up in their house. So they put these mats down. It kept the dust down. Another reason why they used to use it is people used to have stashes, little piles of earth in their house, so that if there's some dirt on the floor, some spits or other type of secretions end up on the floor, you can cover them up with earth. So they used to cover this little pile, this little stash of earth that they had, they would cover it with a mat. So we're talking about those types of mats, and you have some extra ends that you cut off. So mutter l'taltal m'Shabbos, those little pieces would be mutter to be metaltal on Shabbos, and not muksa. What use do they have? My time, Omar Rava Bar Hamduri Asberli, Bar Hamduri explained it to me. Machzelas gufa l'may chosi. What is the main purpose of the mat? L'chesuya be'afra, to cover earth with it. Well, hani nami chajin l'chesuya b'tinoifis. These little pieces of reed you can use to directly cover dirt on the floor with. So therefore, they still have ke'en malachtam. Now, we already learned that as long as they're royu for any malacha, there won't be muksa. So why was it that Bar Hamduri had to go to length to say that this can actually do a similar function to the original function of the mat? So that Tosha speaks out is l'raf chida milsa mafarish. You don't really need it. Alfagav the loy boy me'en malacha rishayna. Kidamar Reb Nachman la'il. Cheres katana mutal tatla bechotzer. You can use it as a cover. It doesn't have to resemble its original use, but it happens to be here that it does, and that's why Bar Hamduri talked about it. Amar B'Zeir Amar Rav Shiori Pruzmiyos, and these are little tiny bits of material. Rashi says they're left over from a talus. So there's one shot to learn that it's like a talus that we wear on Shabbos, so it's a dover shebekdusha. So Ein Ban Gimel al Gimel, I'm sorry. Also, tatel Shabbos, these little pieces you're not allowed to use on Shabbos, they're muksa. Or mabaye, b'matloniyos she'ein bahen gimel al gimel. We're talking about very small pieces of fabric that don't even have 3 fingers by 3 fingers width. Nobody would use them for anything. Since nobody would use them, therefore, they're going to be muksa. Now, the question is, why is it any worse than the little reed? Why can't you use it to cover over dirt? So there are those who learn that's why they learn that it's actually a talus. You're not allowed to use a talus, which is never shebekdusha, to cover earth. Therefore, such a small piece of it will be muksa. But if it was a plain fabric, then maybe it wouldn't be muksa. But then there are those who learn even if it's a plain fabric, not a talus, it would also be usher, because even though technically you can use such a small piece of fabric to cover dirt, you won't. Even an ani would throw out such a piece of fabric. So it doesn't really have much use for anything. You had broken pieces of an old oven, and we'll see that an old oven doesn't necessarily mean so old. Rashi just says, shekfar husak. It was heated up once. So an old oven means it was heated up at least once. The charas of koshem, since it was heated up, its walls have already been forged and strengthened. The chazil lamalacha, and now it's ready to go. So the halacha is, if you had a broken piece of an oven, harein kechol hakelim and little b'chotzer, they're no different than any other kelim that you're allowed to be metaltal. They're not muksa. You could use them to cover over a jug, or look other reasons that we said by any klichers. Divrei meir, they're going to be muksa. You're not allowed to. Another thing the Brisa said is Hayid Rabbi Yosy Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Yosy said testimony in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov al Shavari Tana Yashon, on broken pieces of a old oven. Shenitlim b'Shabbos, you can carry them. So clearly that's like Rameir. V'al Kisuyov, and if you have the cover of an oven, she'enu tzorich beis yad. The cover of an oven is considered a keli, even if it doesn't have a handle with which to carry it. It has a status of a keli and it will not be muksa. So we have this machlokes between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda with broken pieces of an old oven, if it's muksa or not. What is the machlokes totally? So the Gemara wanted to say it's totally the machlokes that we've been discussing yesterday. But oishin mein malacha vein oishin mein malachton kamifli. The machlokes is if you have broken pieces of cheres that are still useful for something, but not useful for the original intention of what they're built for. So which is exactly what we learned in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, there was a machlokes. The Rabbanan hold if these pieces of cheres can just be used to cover over a jug, they're considered not muksa. Rabbi Yehuda held no. In order for these pieces of cheres to retain their status of a keli and avoid muksa is only if they could do a function similar to what they originally did. They were containers, so they have to be able to contain something. So in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said, cheres has to be big enough to hold some porridge, and a broken piece of glass has to be big enough to hold some oil in it. And the Gemara wants to suggest that that's the machlokes here with the shvori tanner, because this time these broken pieces could only be used not to bake; they could only be used to cover over a jug. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds it's going to be muksa, and Rabbi Meir holds it's not going to be muksa. Vos Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei, Rabbi Meir l'tamei. So that's how the Gemara at first wants to explain this shaila. Frek the Gemara, maskef l'rava. If the shaila is the same shaila as the shaila in the Mishnah, ihachiyat the mivli b'shivri tanur, lifli b'shivri kelim b'alma. Why it seems that the Brisa is telling us halacha that applies specifically to an oven. This is not a shaila that has to do with an oven. It's actually a shaila that applies to any keli, if you could use it for its original malacha or not. So why is it that the Brisa expresses this machlokes dafka by a tanner, and Rav holds it must be a different shaila, a halacha that's only relevant to a tanner, and that's why the machlokes is by a tanner. Ela amar Rava b'shivri the high tanner kamifli. They're not arguing about every tanner. They're arguing about the broken pieces of a specific oven that we're about to discuss, a special type of oven. So the normal way to build an oven, and the article I think has very good pictures of it. The normal way to build an oven basically is an upside down pot. Rashi tells us you take an upside down pot. there'd be a little bit of a hole in the top of it. You'd put it on the ground, and then the pot was made out of cheres. Then you would smear it around with a very thick layer of earth to add an insulating layer, and that was your oven. You put coals at the bottom of the oven, which is like an inverted pot. You put coals at the bottom of the oven, and then you could bake things on the side of the oven. It retained a lot of heat. But the oven that we're talking about is a little bit different. Instead of putting this upside down pot on a flat piece of ground, you actually put it over a bar. So now it becomes much, much deeper. And the ArtScroll has good pictures of it. So it looks similar to this. Now, if the hole is a little bit bigger than the actual opening of the pot, the oven would fall down to the bottom. So they would stick a little rock in. They would wedge a rock in between the oven and the side of the bar so that the oven shouldn't fall in. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss soon two different configurations. Here you have your oven. You have your little rock that's wedged in to hold it in place. Or sometimes you could just wedge the oven in place without a rock. Now, the difference between this picture that I want to draw attention to is, in this picture, the bottom of the oven is way, way at the top of the hole, and the fire, if you would put a fire, would sit all the way at the bottom of the hole. Here, the oven is recessed into the hole, so if you put your fire at the bottom of the hole, it's actually closer to the oven than it is here. It doesn't look like it in the picture because it's not drawn to scale, but imagine if the bottom of this oven wasn't over here, but if it was up over here. So then the fire at the bottom of the pit would be much further away than the actual oven. And that, because of that, it won't heat as much. So the Gemara is going to get into discussing that. So let's see what the Gemara says. You put this oven, instead of just putting it on a flat piece of ground, you put it over a hole. A dus is a hole, but it's not a hole that's in the ground. It's a hole that's built up above the ground. So imagine if you build earthen walls a couple of feet high, now you have a bar inside it, even though it's all above ground, or like an above ground pool. And you put a rock in that would wedge it up so that it won't fall in. Rabbi Yehuda holds, if the oven will be properly heated, even though the bottom of the oven is above the surface of the bottom of the bar, so if it's close enough that the heat at the bottom of the bar will actually heat up the oven, then it's a good oven. But if the bottom of the oven is far away, and when you heat up, when you create a flame, when you put your coals at the bottom of the floor of the pit, it doesn't really heat up the oven well, then that doesn't have a status of a good oven. So let's have it again. Let's see it again inside. If the fire at the bottom of the pit will actually heat up the oven really well, tamei, then it will be tamei. But from lav Torah, so we're not even speaking about a broken oven. The oven does not have a status of an oven. If it doesn't have a status of an oven, then it's not a keli, and it's going to be Torah. The Chachamim say, since it does get heated, it might not get heated to the extent that you would want to the extent that a typical oven gets heated to, but it does get heated. It has a status of an oven, and it's going to be tummy. This machloikis as to whether or not the oven has to be properly heated or not, what is it told you? So what's interesting to note, Rashi tells us, ovens are different than any other kalim. All other kalim, they're mechobel karka, they're not makabel tumah. If they're not mechobel karka, they're independent kalim, then they're makabel tumah. An oven is only tamei if it's mechobel karka, because that's how you make an oven. An oven is built when it's connected to the ground. Now, there are different terminologies used for breaking, and we're going to discuss that in a minute. There's the word shvira, and there's the word yutatz. So the Gemara says as follows. The Torah tells us a tanner, which is a klicheres, that becomes tamei, the only way to be retired is to break it, like every klicheres. But the word that the Torah uses is yutatz. Tanner v'kirayim yutatz. Tameim heim, tameim yulachem. Yutatz is a loshon that's used only on the mechubel karka. If it's mechubel karka and it needs to be broken with the lush of the titza, then it has a status of an oven, and then it's going to be tummy. But if it's not really working well because it's mask milamata and it's cooler on top, that's an oven that's considered broken mineu bay. Rashi tells us if it's not close to the ground and it doesn't get properly heated because of that, that's mineu bay, a broken oven. If it's a broken oven, it's not gonna become tomei. You don't have to be mekayim in it. You have to break it to make a Torah. So Zok Rabbi Yehuda, if this is an oven that's not a good oven, then you cannot use the word yutatz on it because it's not connected properly to the ground, and therefore it's going to be tar. So Rabbi Yehuda said, even though this oven is not mechus netitza because it's not really connected to the ground, a lashon of shvira might be more appropriate for it. Nevertheless, since the Torah says Tameim Yulachem, it's a riboy to say even this type of oven is going to be tummy. Zok to Gemara. So we haven't yet seen how it fits back into the Mishnah. Let's just first analyze this machlokes. Rabban and Nami, Haksiv Yutatz. It does say Yutatz, so oy bezoi, this oven should be tar. Zok to Gemara, Agudah lidachisa. The reason why it says yutatz is to tell us a different chiddush. The Torah is trying to tell us something else with the word yutatz, because we know ovens are counterintuitive. They're mechubal karka. Normally, you would think if something's mechubal karka, it shouldn't become tummy at all. You might think that all ovens should never become tummy at all, because by definition, an oven is connected to the ground. So you might think it should be tar. It should be tar. Kamash Malon, Tanner Vicharam Yutatz, the Torah is telling us a chiddush that even though this is connected to the ground and its function is only when it's connected to the ground, it still has a status of a keli and it still will become tamei, and you still have to destroy it if it becomes tamei in order to be retired. Rabbi Yehuda, who holds it's not tamei because you can't use the word yutatz because this oven doesn't function properly. There's a riboy of tameim yulachem. What did he use that pasuk for? So tomorrow, this machloikis as to whether or not the tanner has a status of a tanner is only the first time you're heating it up, which gives it its din of oven. That's what finalizes its status as an oven. There, if it's in such a scenario where it doesn't get properly heated, it doesn't get its name of an oven, and therefore it will be tahar. What if the very first time you fired this oven up, you heated it up properly, and now you're relocating it to a different location and you're putting it into this hole? There, the oven is considered an oven and it's going to be tamei. Not only that, Dr. Yehuda, afilu toli b'tzaver gomel. Even if you took this oven, once it's already heated and forged and finalized, no matter where you put it, even if it's hanging on the neck of a camel and becomes like a mobile oven, that will also have a status of an oven to be tamei. So the whole machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir in this brisa here is the first time you heat up that oven, which is the point where this keli is acquiring the status of an oven. If it wasn't in a place where it could be heated properly, would it acquire its status of an oven? Rabbi Meir held, or the Rabban held, yes, and Rabbi Yehuda holds no. Amar Ula said, the Hezek Risha and the Rabbanon, Afilu Tolu B'Tzavar Gomel. So you want to suggest that the very first time you heat it up, even if it's B'Tzavar Gomel, the Rabbanon in our Mishnah, who are Marbe from Tameim Haim, Tameim Yulachem, that even though it's not an ideal forging of the oven, it still gets its status of an oven. You want to suggest that the Rabbanon would hold that still gets its status of an oven and it's still going to be tamei. Well, okay. So based on this, Ula wants to say, the Gemara wants to say, who was the one who asked the kasha? Rava wants to say that that's pshat in this brisa. Shivrei Tana Yashon Harei and Kekola Kalim Hanitl B'Chotzer. We're referring to not necessarily a broken oven. We're referring to any oven, that was heated, that was not heated properly. So according to Reb Meir, it has the status of an oven, and according to Reb Yehuda, it doesn't have a status of an oven. So we're not even learning, according to Rava, we're not even learning that the earlier brisa that we quoted was speaking about broken ovens, was actually speaking about regular ovens. Let me see if Rashi is masber more. Rashi doesn't fear us, but that's how the Gemara is learning now. That when the Brisa says Shovei Tali Yoshan, it's not really speaking about a broken oven; it's speaking about a regular oven, and it's speaking about this special type of oven. And there's a machlokes with Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda if this special type of oven that was not heated properly the first time that it was heated up, if it has the status of an oven, and if it'll be tamei or not. Reb Meir holds it does have a status of an oven; it will be tamei, and Reb Yehuda holds it won't be tamei, and that also translates into Shabbos. If it's a good oven, then it's nittel b'Shabbos because it's a keli and it's not muksa. And if it's not a good oven, and therefore it's not tamei according to Yehuda, it's also not a good oven to be considered a keli, and therefore it will be muksa. That's how Rava wants to.
What does the word shivrei mean then?
I'm sorry?
What does the word shivrei mean?
It's lav davka. It's lav davka. Let me see if Rashi. I thought I saw Rashi say that beferish. So let's see if Rashi says it beferish. I think I saw Rashi say it beferish earlier. Let me just look at it. No, he doesn't say beferish, but you have to say it's lav dafka. I think. I'm sorry. I'm getting mixed up. That's the next Gemara's kasha. I know I saw it somewhere. It's right in the Gemara, and the Gemara is asking exactly David's kasha. What does shiver mean? The way you're learning, it's heavy oven. It's not just broken pieces of oven. So I apologize. I got a little mixed up. So Frek David Leitman and Frek the Gemara, Maskal Rabashi, Ihachi at the mythically b'shivrei taner, live lagi b'tana gufa. Why is the Bryce's discussion about broken pieces of oven the way Rav is learning? We're discussing the oven itself, if it has a status of an oven or not. Hashta taner gufa l'Rabbi Yehuda lo yavamana. The oven itself, according to Rabbi Yehuda, since it never got heated properly in its maiden voyage, so therefore it doesn't have the status of a keli, and therefore it's going to be muksa. Shvar miboy, for sure its broken pieces are not going to be able to be carried on Shabbos, because even the oven, when it was complete, it doesn't have a status of a keli. Surely it's broken pieces. Exactly David's kasha. I'm looking in Rashi for Gemara. El Amar Abashi, you cannot say your pshat Rava. L'olam k'da Amar me'ikara. The shaila of the brisa that we just quoted at the beginning of the Amid, the machlokes between Reb Meir and the Rabban and Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda by shivarei taner is taka speaking by a regular oven, and it's broken, but it's not exactly the same machlokes. It's ba'oisa ma'isa tafka. Your question was, if it's a shaila of any time a klicheres breaks, the shaila that Rava asked was, why did the brisa chap on dafka taner? It could have chapped on any keli, discussing the status of its broken shards. The teretz is, we're speaking about an oven, and even though this oven is broken up, it still can do baking in an unusual way, and that's ma'aseh tafka. What is ma'aseh tafka? Normally, the way an oven is used is it's that round inverted pot, and you would put things that you want to bake, you would adhere them to the side, to the inside of that pot, and that's what will get baked. Here you have a flat tile. You have like a flat piece of cheres, and you put a fire underneath it, and you put something to bake on top of it. So it's still used in the function of baking, but not in the typical sense, not the typical way, where in an oven you would stick things to the side of the oven, and it would actually be inside the oven. There would be much more heat. Here, you're just putting something on top of this tile that's getting heated from below. So it's a little bit ka'en, its original malacha. And the shaila here between Reb Meir and the Chum is as follows. Reb Meir holds, even if this shard can do anything, not even ka'en its original malacha, it's going to be still tamei, like we saw in the Mishnah. But Reb Meir l'dvar of Reb Yehuda Kamar, this machlokes in our Mishnah, in our brisa above that discusses broken pieces of oven, Reb Meir is telling Reb Yehuda the following: L'didi, according to me, afilu ba'osin me'ein malacha. no matter what you could do with this shard, even if you could only cover a jug with it, that's good enough for me to say that it's not going to be muksa on Shabbos. Elul lidach, according to you who holds, it has to do in order for a shard to be able to be not muksa on Shabbos, you have to be able to use it to do something, ke'en, what it was originally designed to do. At least agree to me, the chahai gavna malachtayu. Say that the use of a broken shard to bake upon should be considered me'ein malach of an oven, and at least agree to me in this case that this will not be muksa. Rabbi Yehuda loydami. Rabbi Yehuda said no, baking on top of a shard is not close enough to the original use when it was an oven. Hasam heskam mibifnim. When it was originally an oven, the heat in the oven was in the inside of the oven. Hacha heskam mibechutz. Here we're heating the tile up from below, and we're putting the bread on top of the tile. So the bread isn't contained within the oven. The bread is outside the oven on one side, and the fire is on the other side of the oven. So in a regular oven, the fire is in the oven, and in the oven is the bread as well. Here, where the fire is below the tile and the bread is on top of the tile, it's exactly the opposite. The fire is on the other side of the cheres from the thing that you're baking. That's too different of a use. Another difference is hasam umid. When you're putting bread on the oven, you're putting it vertical on the side of the oven. Hachalav mumid. Here, you're lying the bread down flat in this tile, like on a pan, like we do things. And therefore, since the use of this cheres is so different from the way it was used in its original state as an oven, I don't consider that me'ein melachton, and therefore I would still hold that this is not a keli, and you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos. Zok the Gemara weiter. Hey, Rabbi Yosy, Mishum B'Lesh Ben Yaakov, Al Shvari Tamer Yoshan Shenitlim B'Shabbos. So that's like a Meir Shita. Val Kisuyov Sheinin Tzorech B'Shad. And the lid of an oven is considered a keli, even though it doesn't have a handle. Omar Vina, Keman Metaltalinon Ha'idna Kisoy de Tanuri de Masamachasya. Who are we soymechan that we do use the covers of ovens in Masamachasya, and those ovens did not have handles to them? The Eilam Beis Achiza. Keman Kerbelazar ben Yaakov, who tells us, who Rabbi Yosy told us holds that even though the lid of an oven doesn't have a handle, it's still considered a keli. Zok the Gemara weiter. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Ha'even shebektera, shebekiruya. They used to improvise in those days quite a bit. So they needed to create a bucket with which they would dip into a well to get water out. So they would take the shell of a pumpkin shell. It acts as a keli. The problem is, a pumpkin shell, if you lower it down into the water, it floats. And since it floats, you're not going to be able to fill it with water. So what they would do is they would put a heavy rock inside the pumpkin shell, which would weigh it down, and then allow it to slip beneath the surface of the water so that they'd be able to use it as a bucket to fill, to get water out of the bar. So Evan should be curious. You have a stone that's at the bottom of this pumpkin shell that's going to weigh it down, so now we can use it as a bucket to fill with water. If it's very well fastened into the shell, so that when you fill it up with water, the stone will not fall out, then you don't consider it muksa. Because normally a stone on the street is muksa. It's muksa mach maskufay. But if this stone is already connected to the shell, it becomes part of the shell, it becomes part of the keli, and therefore it will not be muksa. But v'mlav, if it's going to fall right out, so it's not really part of the shell, so it's not really a keli, ein mimalamba, then you're not allowed to fill with it because that stone is going to be muksa. You know, the Charedim used to demonstrate against the Tziyonim, that's Chil Shabbos, they would throw rocks on Shabbos. The problem is a rock is muksa because it's muksa machmas kufoy. So what these Charedim used to do is before Shabbos, they would create piles of rocks and they would designate them for throwing at the Tziyonim on Shabbos. So now it wasn't muksa. I don't know, they weren't worried about Chil Hashem and about Ritzicha, I'm not sure, but they were very worried that they shouldn't violate the Isser Muksa, so they would actually stockpile these rocks. And Tifa does the same things. They place pallets of bricks where they need them, and they designate them for throwing, so they won't be muksa on Shabbos.
This Mishnah would seem to disagree with that. This Mishnah would seem to say, even though you've designated the rock, it's not good.
Well, it's not considered designated, I guess, unless it's connected.
So what about the case of Rav Nachman with the piece of the keli in the shuk, right? The shard in the shuk.
A shard came from a keli.
So it was once a keli. It still remained. It was still large.
It hasn't yet lost the status of keli because it still has some use.
But here, the idea that you're designating this rock, unless you fasten it, that's not considered designation.
I guess not.
So they don't hold like this. They don't hold like this on whatever that street is.
It's a special circumstance. Okay.
Now, Zalman,
Yes.
I can't keep quiet. The Haredim prepared rocks for people that came into their communities. The BLM or whoever it is that you mentioned, they prepared rocks to go into other communities. And I'm not here defending any rock throwing, but that's a major difference.
You're right.
Maybe when you mix the rock with the baby diapers, then it's considered prepared. That's the other thing to do. Okay.
Okay, sagt Gemara weiter. Zmura shikshura b'tefiach. So here, the string that they used to use, the twine that they used to lower buckets into the water, they actually used a vine. They used a long vine for it. So if you tied it to the bucket, so now you could lower it down. Memalim baba Shabbos, you're allowed to use that vine as the rope to lower the bucket into the water on Shabbos. Pekaka chaloin, you have a window shade. So I envision this as basically a piece of plywood that you're going to use to cover an opening in your window. When is a muksa? Now we're going to soon see that this is a shaila between Rashi and Tosfos if the discussion in our Mishnah is a window, a vertical window, or if it's a question of a skylight, which means it's horizontal in the roof. But for now, we'll just learn that it's a vertical window. You have a piece of plywood that you're going to use as a window shade. In order that we shouldn't consider it building, in order that we should look at it like it's already part of the binyan, you need two conditions. A, it just can't be a loose piece of board. It has to actually be tied. So the way I envision it is the way the Negelasser cups are in the shul. In the shul, they're afraid that people will steal Negelasser cups. They must have. People must have stolen. There's so many things in the shul to steal, but somehow Negelasser cups disappear. I never understood why. So because of that, there's this cable that connects the Negelasser cup. So people come into the Beis Medrash, the first thing they want to steal Negelasser cups, they can't. So they leave, and then they go take the whiskey instead.
You might need it to store all of the pens that you've stolen from the bank. You've got to put the pen somewhere.
I hear. Listen, when I got married, I knew that our in-laws' house, TWA was milchiks and Panam was fleishiks. So I was like, so Rabbi Lezer Omer, I once heard a Rav speak about a Pesach program that he goes to, and he told us that anything that was not bolted down ended up in someone's trunk as he was packing to leave after Pesach. He said they pay so much money, they need to get their money's worth. So anything that's not bolted down moves. So Zok the Gemara weiter. So Rabbi Lezer Omer, this manshu kosher vitali. Two conditions. A, there's a chain that connects this piece of plywood to the wall, so it's connected. And totally, it has to be a short enough chain that this wood's not sitting on the floor, it's actually suspended off of it. So it's quite clear that this is part of the house. Then you're allowed to close up the hole in the wall or the window with this piece of plywood. But if it's dragging on the floor, it's a long chain, then you would not be able to use it. And the Gemara is going to elaborate on that. It doesn't matter. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Zok the Gemara. We have a brisa that says that let's say you have a stone, which is muksa, that's sitting on top of a barrel, and I want to get the contents of the barrel out. So the Brisa tells us, mata al tzida, you're not allowed to pick the stone up, it's muksa, but you have to get it off. So lean the barrel over to its side, v'nei felas, and the stone will fall off, and now you have the barrel free and clear. The Brisa goes on, although the Gemara doesn't quote it, Rashi tells us, what if this barrel is sitting amongst a whole bunch of other barrels? So if you lean over this barrel, the rock's going to roll onto another barrel and potentially break the neighboring chavis. You don't want that to happen. So the halach is you're not to lift that barrel up and out to a different area and then lean it over to get the rock off. So the question is, why, under what conditions are you allowed to lift that barrel up with a rock on top of it and move it? Amar Rabba, Amar Rabami, Amar B'Yechanan. So the names that we want to remember here are Rabbi Ami. So Rabbi Ami says, Lo yishanu ela b'shakeach. This, that you're allowed to lift the barrel up with the rock on it, is only if the rock got there because you, by mistake, you forgot it there. You didn't intentionally place the rock on the barrel. You had forgotten this rock on the barrel. We'll allow you to lift the barrel up with the rock on it, move it over, move it away, and then tilt it for the rock to fall off. But if you consciously place the rock on top of the barrel because you wanted it to be there to act as a seal, whatever, for whatever reason, then nasa bosses l'davar ha'aser. Then the barrel becomes a base to a rock, which is a davar ha'aser. And therefore you would not be able to move that barrel at all. So let's chazar this over. Rabbi Ami says that if you put a rock knowingly on top of a barrel, the barrel becomes a bosses l'davar ha'aser, and you would not be able to move that barrel on Shabbos. For Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabasi, so that's I want to focus on the Rabasi. So Rabbi Ami said that if you put the rock there, it becomes a bosel of Aser. Rabbi Asi Amar B'Yechanan says, Lo yishanu ela b'shakeach. The same halacha. This halacha that you're allowed to lift the barrel up and move it away and then tilt it to get the rock off is only if you forgot it. Avu b'maniach, but if you placed it intentionally, it's exactly the opposite. Nasa kisi la'chavis. Now the rock becomes part of the barrel, and now it becomes a keli, and now lechatchila you're allowed to even lift the rock off itself. So you have a shtickle machloikis, the kotza ela kotza, between Rav Ami and Rabasi. Rav Ami said that when you put the rock on the barrel, it still retains its status of a rock. It doesn't get a status of a cover, and therefore the whole barrel is also to move because it's a bosses l'davar ha'aser. Rabasi's mekel, and he holds if you put the rock on top of the barrel consciously, well, then we look at it as a function of the barrel, a part of the barrel, and therefore it won't be muksa at all. Amar Rabba. So Rabba said, Musvinin hashmaitzin. I have a problem with the halacha that I said. So Rabba was the one who quoted Rabbi Ami, saying that if you place the rock on the barrel consciously, it remains independent and the barrel becomes a bosses l'davar ha'aser. I have a problem with my own halacha. I'm asking a kasha on myself. What's the kasha? Ha'even shabikiruya. In our Mishnah, we learned that you had a rock that you put inside this pumpkin shell to weigh it down. If you could fill with it and it won't fall out, then we say that the rock is bottled to the keli and it's part of the keli and it's not muksa. So that contradicts what I'm saying. Because I said if you put a rock on top of a barrel consciously, it doesn't become part of the barrel. It remains muksa. Not only that, now the whole barrel is usher to move because the bosses will never usher. The Mishnah seems to say something contradictory because the Mishnah says the rock inside the pumpkin shell, if it doesn't fall out, it's going to be part of the pumpkin shell. So that seems to contradict what I'm saying. But in fact, it's not a kasha. Hasam, in the Mishnah, even the Hadka, since we said the rock will not fall out. Why will it fall out? Because you obviously did something. You did something from Maisa to fasten the rock in that it becomes one with the pumpkin shell. Shav Yadayfin, you made it part of the wall. But just putting a rock on top of a barrel, that doesn't quite cut it. And therefore, even our Mishnah would be Maida that the barrel will become usher because it's a bossus to the davar usher to the rock. Omer Rabbi Yosef umasvina neshmaitzin. Rabbi Yosef was the one who quoted Rabbi Asi, who holds that if you put the rock on, it becomes bottle to the barrel, and the rock is no longer muksa. I also have a problem with my shita from our Mishnah, because the same case of the Mishnah. In lav, if the rock that you put into the pumpkin shell will fall out, if it's not connected, then ein malimba. Then you're not allowed to fill it. You're not allowed to fill with it. So you see that if it's not connected, it's not bottle. Here the rock isn't connected. The rock I just put on, yet I'm still saying it becomes part of the keli. So against the ratio, it's not a kasha. There, since it wasn't connected, it's going to be bottle. I think I made a mistake. I think it's the second case. It's the second. So let me read this again. It's talking about the zmura. You have a vine that you tie to a bucket. If it's tied to the bucket, then you could fill with it. But if it's not tied to the bucket, then you cannot fill with it. So on that, Dr. Yosef, so you see from here that if it's not physically tied, you cannot use it. And here by the rock, I just placed it on. So and for the Gemara, it's not shver because kibud lahatka b'tula batla. Since there, if I didn't tie the rope or the vine to the cup, it's worse because it'll be bottled. But in our case, with the rock there, the rock will not be bottled. So Mar Sover, what is the machlokes between Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, whether or not when you put a rock on a barrel, if it becomes part of the barrel or not? Mar Sover being a Maisa. Rabbi Ami held you need a Maisa. You can't just put a rock on the barrel and say now it's part of the barrel. You have to do something physically. You have to modify that rock to make it part of the barrel. Umar Sover being a Maisa. Rabbi Asi says the mere fact that you put it there and you want to leave it there, that's enough to make it part of the barrel. And their machlokes is similar in the same svara as a different machlokes. The Chiyasur Abdimi Amar Abchanina. When Abdimi said, he said in the name of Abchanina, Ramad Amar B'Zeir Amar Abchanina, Pam Achas Holach Rebbe L'Mokom Echad. Once upon a time, Rebbe went somewhere, and I guess he went with his Talmidim. He was planning to stay there for Shabbos. Maybe he went on a camping trip with his Talmidim, and he was going to stay there for Shabbos. And at his campsite, Umotza Nadvach Shalavanim. He saw a skid of bricks clearly set aside to be used as a building materials. So clearly muksa. But he wanted to use them over Shabbos, these blocks. So he told his Talmidim, go and have in mind, because if you have in mind that you want to use them tomorrow to sit on, because I want to use them on Shabbos, I want to use them as benches. I want to take advantage of these rocks. So have kavanah that we're going to use them. And Rebbe didn't insist that they do something physical to these rocks. The mere fact that we have an intent to do something with the rocks, with these bricks, he's allowing them to use them on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan Omer, that's not what happened. Hetzrichan Rebbe L'maisa. In fact, Rebbe did mandate that they do something. What was the Maisa? What did Rebbe want the Talmidim to do to these bricks? So they should be designated as seats for tomorrow. Amalahu Rabbi my Amalu. What did he tell the Talmidim to do exactly? Rabbi Ami Amar. So now we're getting into our machlokes between Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Rabbi Ami Amar. So v'lamdim Amalahu. What he told them to do is rearrange them so that we could use them. Rabbi Asi Omar, Rabbi Asi said, "Tzu v'shivshivim, just wipe them off." Omar lahu. So Rabbi Ami required a serious maisa, just like he holds by us. If you're putting a rock on top of a barrel, won't make it part of the barrel. Rabbi Asi said he just needed to wipe them off. Wiping them off isn't really doing anything. It's just a maisa koldu. Yet it was enough, in Rabbi Asi's opinion, that would prepare it. So that's our machlokes here as well. Rabbi Asi, who says that Rav just said, just wipe them off. That's like putting the rock on top of a barrel. That will become part of the barrel. The rock will no longer be muksa. Rabbi Ami said, Suvalamdim, it needs a bigger maisa, And that's l'shitase, that by the barrel, unless the rock, you did something to the rock to modify it, just placing it on it wouldn't take away its status of muksa. Itmar, the Benjamin Shalomer, Sawyer shall have it. It actually wasn't bricks, it was beams. It was beams, and Rashi says there were new beams. New beams could warp, so they have to be laid out properly so that they should remain straight. And that's why there's still muksa b'chsar here. In those days, they didn't have fish finders that are made with sonar radar and depth gauges, so we know when we're riding in our boats, we know how deep the water is, so that we won't run aground. Their depth finder was a little bit more primitive. It was a long stick, and they would stand at the front of the boat and put the stick down and see how deep it went into the water. But that's a very critical tool, because without it, they can run aground. And there, you're more makbid on such a tool that it should remain straight. So Mandamer Geshoish, the Mandamer holds that he allowed them with a Maisumu Etis to use that type of stick to sit on, where there would typically be a greater akpada not to use it for anything else. Kolshkein Sawyer, surely a beam, he would allow you to use. Mandamer Sawyer, the Mandamer holds that it was a beam, by this type of stick, people would be makbid on it, would be muksa b'chsar, and for sure, Rebbe would not have allowed his talmidim to sit on it. Zoktimor weiter. Zmura shikashur. So we have a bucket, and it's tied to a long vine, and that vine is what you're using as a rope to lower the pail into the water. Zoktimor, shur in like shur lo. If it's tied up, if it's tied to it, fastened, then you can use it to lower the bucket down. But like shur lo, you cannot use it. Our Mishnah seems not to be consistent with the sheet of the Tanya of Shimon Gamliel. The Tanya, you cut branches off of a palm tree to use as firewood, which means they would be muksa on Shabbos. But then you decided that you want to use them to sit on. So the halach is tzorech likshar. You can't just in your mind designate them. You have to actually tie them together, and that will change its status from firewood into a chair. But Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, ein tzorech likshar, you don't have to. Now in our brayso it says that you have to tie the zmura, you have to tie it to the bucket. It's not enough just to hook it on. If the zmura had like a hook shape, you actually have to physically tie it. So that you see is not consistent with Reb Shimon Gamliel, because Reb Shimon Gamliel says you don't have to physically tie it together by the chair. I feel to him Reb Shimon Gamliel. Maybe Reb Shimon Gamliel would be moida in our brayso, in our Mishnah, that you do have to tie it. Why? We're not speaking about a loose piece of vine. We're actually speaking about a vine that's still growing from the ground. If it's growing from the ground, even Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is moida that you have to tie it to the bucket. If it's mechuber, you're not allowed to use it at all. The halach is you're not allowed to use a mechuber karka because you might cut it, and it could come to a tlisha malacha deraisa. So how could you say the Mishnah is allowing a vine to be used as the rope that lowers a pail into a bar, provided that it's tied to the bucket? You can't use that vine; it's connected to the ground. And the only type of gedulei karka that are also to use are things that are above 3 tvachim. But this vine is a very low vine, and therefore you're allowed to use it on Shabbos. And therefore, Reb Shimon Gamliel says this you have to tie, because if you don't tie it, then it's not called bottle to the keli because it's still connected to the ground. Even if it's cut, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel would still hold that you have to tie the vine to the bucket. Even though normally he holds you don't have to tie things, just having in mind that you're using these leaves as a chair would make them non-muksa. But when it comes to this vine, you have to tie it. You know why? If you just have a long vine and it's not tied to the bucket, then we're afraid on Shabbos when you use it, you might find that this rope is too long and you might trim it, which would be usher on Shabbos. However, if we force you to tie it before Shabbos, then you're going to pay attention to its length before Shabbos, and any trimming that you would be inclined to do, you'll do before Shabbos, and therefore there's no gzeir that you can do it on Shabbos. And now we're going to get up to the most interesting part of the day, is Pekaka Chaloin, is covering the windows. Amar Rabbi B'Chanan Rabbi Yochanan. Now let me ask you a shayla. We have the shayla, we all have the shayla. What happens if your schach blows off your sukkah? Are you allowed to put it back on? Or are you allowed to open up a shlach akiva? Are you allowed to close your shlach on Shabbos? Are you not making an oil? Are you not covering something that wasn't covered?
So if, as far as I remember, you are allowed to close it because I think it's partly on it, or we say that it's really part of the
If it's
schach.
to open a tevach, so then you're not making an oil. You're not allowed to make an oil on Shabbos and then Yom Tov. But if it's partially closed, partially open, so it's like covering a tevach, so there's an oil here, all you're doing is adding on to the oil. Same thing with this, with if your schach blows off. If it's a kosher or a sukkah, even though some schach is missing, you're allowed to put the schach back. So that's what our sugya here is talking about. Amar Rabbi B'Chanan Rabbi Yochanan. Now, Koil Moedim, everybody agrees, she'ein oisin oil ayr b'tchila b'yom tov. And Rashi says it's referring to a horizontal plane. So you have 4 walls, 4 posts. You're not allowed to put a cover over it like a chuppah. You're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov because you're making an oil. Surely on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do that. Loi nechleku, the machloikis is, and that's referring to our Mishnah, el lahoshif. If you already have an oil, are you allowed to add to it? So here you already have a house with a roof. And the question really is you're covering one area of the roof that wasn't covered until now. You want to close up your skylight. So the loch is, you're not allowed to add to the oil. That's why Rabbi Lezer said that it's only mutter if the piece of wood is tied, is connected to the wall, and it's not long enough to chain that the wood's resting on the floor. It's actually suspended off it. So then it's not considered that you're being moist on the oil because clearly this is part of your house. But the chum hold, even if it's drailing on the floor, as long as it's tied, that's good enough to say that you're allowed to cover the skylight with it, because Masifim b'Shabbos, you are allowed to add to oil on Shabbos. So this machlokes, we all like the Chachamim, and that's why we're allowed to open a shlach or close a shlach on Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's only because the Chacham hold you're allowed to be mosif to an oil arai on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Tosfos learns this is actually a question of walls. And the pashas of our Mishnah is speaking about a wall. Rashi holds for sure everyone's moida, you're allowed to be moshev to a wall, you're allowed to cover up holes in the wall without a problem. The whole shaila is only on the skylight. But Tosfos learns the shaila is on the wall as well. But this is mamish the shaila that we have every sukkah. The reason why we're allowed to close our shlach on the range is only because of this, is because the chum holds you're allowed to be moshev to the oil aray and Shabbos. Okay, I guess we could stop here. Have an easy fast. What time does the fast end tonight? I think this is the longest fast of the year.
I think it's a 9:50.
Wow, we need a good Zoom session.
I think Yom Kippur is the longest fast of the year.
Yeah, no, I mean the longest day. Yeah. Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av are the full 26 hours. Right?
Yeah, but Tisha B'Av, we got good videos to watch the whole day.
9:46.
So it's a long night. We have a long day today.
Yosy, are you out of quarantine?
Today is my first day out of quarantine. I'm like an uncaged animal.
There's a new term.
Today.
There's being Mevakar Cholim and there's being Mevakar quarantiners.
You sent a beautiful story over. Did everyone see the story that Shmuel sent from Jonathan Rietti?
Good story, no?
Unbelievable story.
Yeah,
it's an unbelievable story.
I don't always send jokes.
That was a good story.
Did you read? Did you see the thing going around with the doctor? What's the name? The doctor from Flatbush. He was writing how even with antibodies. You see that?
I saw it coming. I didn't read it yet.
I saw it last night. He was talking. There was someone who had antibodies.
David Zolty sent it out.
I mean, yeah, he has so many antibodies that he even was able to donate plasma and everything, and he got it again. This guy.
Really?
Yep.
Is this the
fear-mongering doctor? He said they're opening up working fast in New York.
Yes, Dr. Gritchick.
He's the fear-mongering guy.
Yeah.
But he's telling you the facts. I mean, unless the facts aren't true.
No. Shmuel, there's a difference between facts and data.
Yes, you should have him on. He'd be good.
No.
he told over the same story that the Rav told.